Yep, the Dolphins got smoked yesterday. Welcome to today's edition of Raw Takes with Andrew Hoty. As always, please like and subscribe if you like this show. And if you want more of Raw Takes, then check me out on social media. You can find me at Hoty Raw Takes on Instagram, Hoty Andrew on Twitter/X, or Facebook Raw Takes with Andrew Hoty. Hope everyone's having a great week. Let's preview a little bit about week 2. We'll talk a little bit about Buffalo taking down Miami 31-10. Oh my goodness, what a game that was. I mean, Miami just couldn't get anything right. And it goes back to what my problem with the Dolphins has been all along, and that is the fact that Tua is just not the guy. I was against the contract. I didn't believe in him from the start, essentially. I think, obviously, the Dolphins missed out on Justin Herbert, and it's going to start to show now. But the Miami Dolphins have a serious quarterback problem. Now, with that said, Tua Tagovailoa also got a concussion yesterday, and I'm praying for his health, and I hope he gets back to the field as soon as he can, because I think he's the Dolphins' best option, but the Dolphins really don't have any other options. No options at all. So the Dolphins are kind of in a really tricky situation because the offensive talent on that team is incredibly good. You have Tyreek Hill. You have Jalen Waddle. You have a really good offensive line. Maybe not the best in the NFL, but one of the top-tier offensive lines, I would say. The defense is okay. Obviously, it didn't look really that good against the Bills yesterday, but it's good enough where the Dolphins should be a lot better than what they really are. And I think Mike McDaniel is one of the better coaches in the NFL. I just think he's kind of stuck in the fact that the Tua Tagovailoa era began really before he got there. I don't know if Tua Tagovailoa was originally his guy or not. I think he was definitely Chris Greer's guy, the GM, but the Miami Dolphins right now are kind of in a pickle with the quarterback situation, and they clearly have a quarterback problem. Tua turns the ball over way too much. And as I said, I'm hoping he gets back to the field soon, but I kind of think he's the problem with Miami. I just don't believe he's the guy. I really don't. And I think the Dolphins are going to struggle with that because of it. Now, Skylar Thompson could come in and possibly do a really good job. I still think the Dolphins are going to be playing the bad teams really, really well. I mean, they beat Jacksonville, and Jacksonville had no business losing that game. They were up 17-7. So the Dolphins clearly have some flaws, but they can come back and get you. I still think their offense is going to be one of the top in the NFL. And it's still a long season to go. But man, the Buffalo Bills own the Miami Dolphins. With that said, now the Buffalo Bills lead the AFC East. I picked them to win the AFC East and still think they will. As I said, I'm rooting for the Dolphins to kind of take over, but clearly the Bills are still in the driver's seat. With that being said, though, I mean, you look at Josh Allen and the way he plays, he is just so physical from a quarterback perspective. And you look at Buffalo's defense. I mean, Buffalo's defense really got the job done yesterday in terms of the fact they didn't let Miami score even in the red zone late in the game. Miami's only touchdown was early on. Von Miller sacked Skylar Thompson late in the game on a 4th and 8, and it was for a huge loss and gave Buffalo better field position to take over on downs. Buffalo's defense is the real deal. And of course they were able to turn over the ball for the Miami Dolphins to themselves. And it's just incredible what Buffalo's defense was able to do yesterday. It honestly incredible. And the pick six, of course. Buffalo is set, I think, as probably the top team in the AFC East. I think the Jets are going to kind of put up a little bit of a fight because they have Aaron Rodgers. I think the Dolphins slowly start to figure things out. But, I mean, honestly, a lot of times we all look at Miami and the hype gets to them, and what happens? The Dolphins fold. They're essentially looking at the Cowboys of the AFC in terms of the fact they really collapse once the pressure gets to them. They could beat all the bad teams, but then once they face a good opponent or a reasonable opponent that's made the postseason or looking like they're going to make the postseason, they fold. They fold like a bunch of lawn chairs. It's a problem with the Miami Dolphins, and they need to figure it out. And it could be a problem long term. I think a lot of people yesterday were rooting for the Dolphins to really kind of arrive, make that statement against the Buffalo Bills. And every time we think they can do it, they fold. Just like that. They fold. They fold. And so it's a problem for the Miami Dolphins going forward, and we'll have to see what happens for their season. With that being said, let's talk a little bit more about Week 2, some of the upcoming slate of games, and what that means for all the teams in the NFL. All right, the Browns and the Jacksonville Jaguars, both these teams 0-1. I think both of these teams are built to win. I think both of them are pretty flawed as well. So this is going to be an interesting matchup on Sunday. I still think the Jacksonville Jaguars slowly start to figure things out, but I think the Browns are kind of in a pickle, especially because Deshaun Watson has a lot of things going on off the field right now. So it's going to be tough for him to try to rebound after that disastrous performance against the Dallas Cowboys last Sunday. I will take the Jacksonville Jaguars to win this game at home. I just think the Jaguars are in a much more stable position right now than the Browns based on what's going on in their offense. I think their offense will definitely be able to eat up some clock by running the football with ETN. I think Trevor Lawrence had a good game last week, just needs to kind of keep it up. Deshaun Watson really is kind of in a pickle right now. I just don't see how he recovers from it. I'm hoping he does, but oh man, it's going to take a lot. Not just from the off-the-field standpoint, because there's got to be a lot of things going on in his mind off the field. Personally, and obviously with the new accusation and losing his father and his friend. I mean, a lot to deal with right now for Deshaun Watson. But the thing is, the Browns' offense is still really good. If Deshaun Watson is just 50% of what he is really, then I think the Browns have a chance to win this game. But nothing about the Dallas Cowboys game gives me any reason to believe that will be the case. I think the Jacksonville Jaguars will win this game. It may be a close game, but I'm not really sure. The Browns' offense was putrid. And I mean putrid. Now, their defense is really good. And I think the Browns' defense is going to have to be the unit that wins games for them early on in the season until Deshaun Watson figures everything out off the field. It's going to be a really tough situation, I think, for the Browns. And Jacksonville, although I think the Browns may be helped by the fact there probably will be a lot of Browns fans in the stands in that game, I don't know if that's going to be enough for the Cleveland Browns to overcome a lot of their offensive flaws. And it doesn't just start with Deshaun Watson. We still got to figure out the status of the tackles. That's a big question mark for the Browns. No David Njoku. That's going to hurt them in terms of not having another weapon. And you don't have Nick Chubb, obviously, for at least 3 more games. It's going to be really tough for the Browns to, I think, overcome all of that, especially Deshaun Watson. So Jacksonville should win this game, in my opinion. It may be pretty close. New Orleans Saints and the Dallas Cowboys, both of these teams coming off blowout wins. Obviously, the Cowboys blew out the Browns, and the Saints really blew out the Carolina Panthers, who I think most of us believe are pretty awful. So I think this team has a shot to prove themselves a little bit against the Dallas Cowboys. Now, with that said, I think the Dallas Cowboys are much more Super Bowl contenders than the New Orleans Saints, so I think the Cowboys win this game, and it is at home. So they're going to have a big advantage with that Dallas crowd hooting and hollering. New Orleans plays really good indoors too, but I think the Saints are going to be in a little bit of trouble with that. I still think Derek Carr is really good, and their offense definitely was clicking on all cylinders last week, but against Carolina, that probably will happen. So I'll take the Dallas Cowboys to win this game. All right, Buccaneers-Lions, a little bit of a revenge game after last year's playoff game for Tampa Bay. Obviously, Detroit won in the divisional round, and Baker Mayfield, I think, has a bone to pick a little bit, and he played really good last week. So I like the Buccaneers in this game to kind of get a revenge match out of the Detroit Lions, but I would not be stunned at all if Detroit ends up winning this game. It's at home. They obviously play really good indoors too, and that crowd in Detroit is now really hostile given the fact that Detroit has been really good over the last year. So I think the Lions have that advantage, but Tampa Bay is coming, and I think they're going to be cooking a little bit with Baker Mayfield, and they definitely are going to want to win this game because of the divisional round last year. So I am actually going to pick Tampa to win. All right, Indianapolis and Green Bay. This game obviously outdoors. Indy used to being indoors, and they played against Houston last week, but you know, they have a retractable roof, so it kind of goes back and forth. Green Bay, to me, I think has a really good offense, but who knows what it's going to look like without Jordan Love. It's still very young for the most part, but they could run the football for the most part. They could also make decent enough plays. I don't think Jordan Love's going to be the guy in this game. I still think he's going to be out for a little bit longer. And, of course, if you look at the Indianapolis Colts and how well they played last week, they really competed with the Houston Texans. I like this matchup for both of these teams, but with no Jordan Love, and with how Anthony Richardson played last week, I think Green Bay is going to get off to an 0-2 start. I'm going to take Indy over Green Bay this weekend. The New York Jets, I think, are going to be fine. I think they were just playing a really good opponent, the San Francisco 49ers. And I think the defense deserves a lot more props. They only allowed 2 touchdowns for the San Francisco 49ers. A lot of those 32 points were field goals. So the Jets' defense, I think, is really good. I think Aaron Rodgers just needs to get in more of a rhythm with some of the Jets players. Obviously, Alan Lazard and he have had it since the Green Bay days, but they have a really easy opponent this week in the Tennessee Titans. Tennessee lost that game themselves against Chicago last week. That wasn't the Bears that did their bidding for them. So I'm going to take the Jets over the Titans. Now, the 49er offense looked good, but it didn't look world-changing, and I think that's because the Jets' defense really held it together when it came to that 49er offense. Minnesota obviously looked like they could do no wrong against the New York Giants, but Minnesota is still a pretty flawed team. But with that being said, Sam Darnold is very familiar with the Kyle Shanahan system. He is. And so he may be able to read Kyle Shanahan's defense very well because he was backing up Brock Purdy last year. So I'm actually going to take Minnesota at home to upset the San Francisco 49ers. They did it last year, too. Kirk Cousins had the game of his life last year against San Francisco. So I think Minnesota kind of has their number right now. With that being said, Minnesota I don't think is going to be a really good 2-0, but if that ends up being the case, I think Minnesota could absolutely be able to read what's going on with that San Francisco defense. They were able to do it last year. I think now that they have Sam Darnold starting, he could read the defense really well. I'm going to take the Minnesota Vikings to top the San Francisco 49ers. Alright, a game I'm not very interested in, I don't think a lot of people are interested in nationally, is the Seattle Seahawks and the New England Patriots. I think the New England Patriots kind of stunned the world last week by defeating the Cincinnati Bengals, but Cincinnati has a lot of problems going on because they can't figure out their players' contracts. That's going to be a big thing for Cincinnati. With that being said, though, Seattle also kind of struggling against the Denver Broncos, but the Seattle Seahawks ended up winning that game regardless. That could be kind of like a shootout style game. I think both of these teams aren't very good to begin with. But because of how New England played against Cincinnati last week, and the defense really locked in and shut them down, I think they could do the same to Seattle. I like New England to beat Seattle this week. Divisional matchup between the New York Giants and the Washington Commanders. I was really high on the Giants in the offseason. I think I was very wrong after watching their Week 1 performance. And the Commanders, they moved off of Cade York because he couldn't make some kicks, but, I mean, their defense really wasn't great in that game, but their offense kind of came to life a little bit. So I like the Commanders to defeat the Giants this week. All right, the LA Chargers are going to start 2-0 over Carolina. Carolina's a joke. They're just a joke. We saw it last week how much of a joke they are. Jim Harbaugh, in his coaching debut with LA, ended up taking it to the Raiders pretty hard, 22-10. The Raiders, I think, put up a reasonable fight, but it still ended up being a 2-possession game, and the offense really didn't get going. But we still saw some decent plays from Gardner Minshew. Justin Herbert, I think, could really light it up as well. So I'm going to take the Chargers to win this game over Carolina, obviously, and I think it's going to be a blowout. All right, the Las Vegas Raiders, the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens coming off a, I think, good loss against Kansas City. They were in that game all the way till the end. Ravens, to me, right now look like the best team in the AFC North. Obviously, Pittsburgh's currently leading it, so I can't really say they are based on the numbers, but overall, I think Baltimore had the best week offensively last week, so I think they know what they're doing in terms of that. And with an easier opponent like the Las Vegas Raiders, I think that kind of cools the temperature a little bit. So I'm going to take the Ravens at home to defeat the Las Vegas Raiders, but I would not be surprised if the Las Vegas Raiders put up a really good fight. The Rams and Cardinals. The Cardinals put up a pretty good fight against the Buffalo Bills, and the Rams really were in that game all the way through against the Detroit Lions. Because of that, I'm actually still taking the Cardinals, because the Cardinals were really feisty last week. I think the Rams did have a good loss, and I think they're going to be really good, but I think they're going to start things off 0-2. I think Arizona is going to surprise some people this week. And if they don't surprise anybody this week, if Arizona ends up losing this game, they were in the game with Buffalo all of last week. And Buffalo's defense did not look good last week compared to this week against Miami. So for me personally, I just think Arizona's like in a really interesting situation where they can compete with a lot of teams this year and may not win a few games. If Arizona doesn't win this week, I'll probably won't pick them for a while against a reasonable opponent. But I think they're going to upset the Rams at home. Steelers-Broncos. Bo Nix had a pretty good first start last week against the Seattle Seahawks. Now, with that being said, I don't think it was too much. I still think the Denver Broncos got a long way to go. But, I mean, in that altitude against the Pittsburgh Steelers and looking at how pathetic the Pittsburgh Steelers offense really was last week, they did enough to win. Not going to complain about that. The Pittsburgh Steelers got the win. Their defense is really good, too. But in that altitude, I think not being able to score a touchdown last week is going to affect them in Denver. So I actually like the Broncos in this game. They start to figure things out a little bit, but they still got a long way to go. And for Pittsburgh, I think Pittsburgh's going to start to kind of unravel offensively, but they'll figure things out within time. I just think that altitude is going to be a real big struggle for them going into this Sunday. All right, we already got the Cincinnati Bengals and the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, the Cincinnati Bengals and Joe Burrow historically have played Kansas City really well. I still think that continues. But having said that, Cincinnati look like a lot of those player contract situations are really affecting them right now. And Joe Burrow wasn't himself to open the season. And this game is at Arrowhead, a hostile environment. Kansas City should get this one in the bag, honestly. They really should. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if Kansas City loses because I do think the Bengals should be a lot better than they are, but they're kind of underachieving right now. When you lose to New England, that's not a good sign. So I'm going to take the Chiefs to win this game. Think the Bengals can, but it's going to depend on can they get everything situated with the players right now because it looks like chemistry is off somewhere, and that may be on coaching. I think there's some hidden problems in Cincinnati that are going to start to reveal themselves because of these contract situations going on with Jamar Chase and whatnot. It's going to be tough for them to figure this out. But right now, I think Kansas City is just complete and they know what they are. And because of that, Kansas City should win this game. All right, the Bears and the Texans. I'm completely sold on Houston after what I saw last week against Indianapolis. Not sold on the Bears one bit. Their offense didn't really do anything. That was all their defense and special teams. So I'm going to take the Houston Texans to defeat the Chicago Bears easily at home. Chicago's not going to be very good this year. I still have them going 5-12. Caleb Williams didn't even throw for 100 yards last week at his first start. He's going to struggle. He's a rookie. He may get better within time, but I still don't believe in him. Houston has a guy I do believe in very much so in C.J. Stroud. They have the weapons to take care of business, and it already looks like so far the trade with the Browns, they're winning it. It's that simple. Houston's going to win this game over Chicago. All right, the Eagles against the Falcons. I like the Eagles in this game offensively, but not defensively. I think it helps Atlanta out a little bit that they have a lot of good offensive players, and they were just playing a really good defense in the Pittsburgh defense last week. So for me, I think it should be an easy game for Philadelphia to win. But with that being said, Atlanta really has to figure out how their offense is going to roll. They're playing a much easier defense this week. That should help them out. Philadelphia's defense isn't Pittsburgh's defense. But also Pittsburgh's offense isn't Philadelphia's offense. So can the Atlanta Falcons hold the Philadelphia Eagles down to some more field goals? We'll have to see. I mean, the Atlanta Falcons still didn't let up a touchdown last week, so is their defense a lot better than we know? We'll have to see. But Philadelphia's offense on paper should be better. Their defense is just going to struggle. So I think this is going to be kind of a shootout game just because we really don't know too much about both these teams yet. But based on week one, that's what we could take away. So I think Philadelphia wins the game, but Atlanta keeps it close. So those are my thoughts on week 2. Let me know what you think. Comment in the video below or reach out to me on social media. If you want to let me know your picks, if you agree with my picks, where you think I'm right, where you think I'm wrong, and then after week 2 happens, where I was right, where I was wrong, I always have a good mix of both, and I'm going to let you know what I think right here on Raw Takes with Andrew Hoty. Oh boy, last night the Guardians struggled really bad. 5-2, the Tampa Bay Rays took the first game of a 4-game series here in Cleveland. I'm not panicking, obviously, because I think the Guardians figure things out. Gavin Williams did pitch through 5 1/3 of an inning. He did get another loss. Obviously, he's going to struggle a little bit still coming off that injury. You look at the Los Angeles Dodgers game he pitched in, and he was really, really bad in that one. He still has a lot of stuff, though. He's just got to piece it all together. It's tough as a pitcher to come back from injury and expect consistency the whole way. He's not a guy I'm necessarily relying on when it comes to the postseason, though. I think he's going to be very vulnerable. With that being said, though, he still got through 5 1/3. Guardians need that to kind of ease the tension in the bullpen. And you look at the fact that Lane Thomas has been coming to bat in recent games. A lot of us are saying right now, man, we were wrong on Lane Thomas. We definitely were. Lane Thomas has really come to the show and played really well. Andres Jimenez with an RBI yesterday. The Guardians definitely look like they're in pretty good shape. But I'll tell you what, Tampa Bay's a hard outing. They're essentially just sub 500. They're not that bad, but they're not that good. So Tampa Bay is going to be competing with a lot of teams, and they've been essentially competing for a playoff spot the entire year. I think that ship has kind of sailed when you look at the teams that are ahead of them in the wild card round, but Tampa Bay's been in it really the entire year. But they've been in 4th place in a really good division in the AL East. But you look at the AL Central too, seeing that there's going to probably be 3 playoff teams from there. Guardians have kind of had the ropes handled as well. Now with that being said though, Zach Little will take on Tanner Bybee today, and Tanner Bybee has got an ERA still under 4. He's struggled, though, as of late. Kind of concerning. But I still think the Guardians have the edge in today's game. Now, Tampa Bay's offense, I still think, could come to life, and they showed it yesterday. The Guardians' offense has to do the same, and it's good that we're having all these other contributing factors outside of Stephen Kwan, Josh Naylor, and Jose Ramirez, who have not been themselves, but have been okay in some arenas, but really not been themselves like they were at the beginning of the season. But Lane Thomas has come to life. You look at Andres Jimenez, he's doing a good job making contact with the ball. A lot of the players late this season we didn't think were going to make a huge impact earlier on in this season have made it right now. And so that's huge for the Guardians going forward. And we're at a home stretch of games right now where we really need to focus on that Minnesota Twins series, the last divisional series of the year. We do have the Houston Astros to conclude this season, which may be an ALDS preview. But, you know, the Guardians right now just need to figure out how to keep the ship afloat. They're essentially winning this division. They're in the driver's seat. They control their own destiny. I think the magic number is 11 or 12 games until they can win the division. So they got to reach that number in order to clinch the division. And I think they're about 5 or 6 in the magic number just to clinch a playoff spot. So they're in really good position. If I'm the Guardians, though, I want to get to the ALDS right away. So win this division and get the 2nd or 1st place spot. I don't know which they'll get. They obviously have 63 losses now, so they can't win 100 games this year. But it doesn't look like anybody is going to be winning 100 games this season right now, based on the trajectory of both the American League and the National League. Now, we know the White Sox have already lost 100 plus, but the Guardians definitely need to figure that aspect of things out. And I think they will. I think it's going to come down to where they're positioned in the playoffs. I honestly want them to get to the ALDS based on their playoff positioning, not based on a wild card series. They don't need to play a wild card series. This team needs to get immediately to the ALDS so they can skip one round and immediately get to the ALCS within one series, as opposed to having to go through the whole wild card round, and that can wear your team out. Now, obviously, the Arizona Diamondbacks made the playoffs and made that magical run last year. Could happen to anybody. So I'm not going to say that's not a bad thing, but with that being said, get to the ALDS based on your standings, especially because, personally, I don't know if the Guardians are going to be a great playoff team. The season has been a pleasant surprise in a lot of ways. I don't think anyone thought the Guardians would be in the position to win the division like they are right now and possibly be the 1st or 2nd seed in the American League. And Stephen Vogt being a manager candidate of the year in the American League. Nobody thought this was going to happen. Let's just be honest, nobody did. This team has a lot of young talent on it. As I said, I don't think they're going to make a deep postseason run as of right now, but you just never know until you make the dance. Things could happen that really stun you. So why not get a round ahead into the ALDS and get one of those wild card teams so you can instantly get to the ALCS if you win. With that said, it could be Houston, and that would be scary. But we'll cross that bridge once we get to it. The only significant ranked matchup I see is number 6 Missouri versus number 24 Boston College going into this week. There's just a lot of bad football games this weekend, really, when you look at the slate. So that may be the one game to kind of keep your eye on just because both teams are ranked. With that being said, Missouri should win that game easily. Ohio State, I'm not going to keep going on and on because it's the bye week, but obviously it's just Ryan Day beat Michigan, Ryan Day beat Oregon, Ryan Day beat Penn State. We know he can beat Penn State. He hasn't lost to Penn State. But it's about turning it around against Michigan and turning it around against Oregon. I'm going to keep saying that. These beginning of the season college football games that are unranked against opponents like Marshall and Western Michigan, Akron, those games don't matter. They're bye weeks. The Ohio State Buckeyes started off with 4 bye weeks this season. 4 bye weeks. That's just how bad these opponents are. They're going to start to roll things in once they get to Big Ten play. They got Penn State on the schedule. They have Oregon on the schedule. They have Michigan at the end of the year. Thanksgiving weekend. That's what's going to be important about Ohio State's season. And when you look around the ranked teams, Georgia obviously number 1, Texas 2. Texas might be the best team because they beat Michigan, but who knows how good Michigan is right now because they lost so bad to Texas. You look at Alabama being 4, trailing Ohio State. Alabama should be pretty good overall. Mississippi, Missouri right on their tails. This is looking like it's going to be a very interesting bracket right now in terms of the 12 teams. Michigan's not even in the top 12 right now. So Michigan's not even in the postseason. Ohio State has a lot at stake. A lot at stake. Especially when you look at some of the top tier teams like Georgia, Texas, Alabama, etc., etc. Right now, Georgia, Texas, Ohio State, Alabama, those are your 4 byes for the 12-team format, which I'm really excited about. It's going to have to come down to what all 4 of those teams do throughout the rest of the season. Beating Michigan, beating Oregon, and beating Penn State. Those are going to be the 3 key matchups for Ohio State going into the postseason. They should easily get there. But the question is, can they play those tough opponents really, really well? I believe it against Penn State. Not so sure against Oregon, but Oregon looks vulnerable, and after Michigan's bad loss, hopeful that Ohio State has the edge this year. That's going to be really interesting to find out what takes place. Because at the end of the day, Michigan has taken control of this rivalry. It's going to be on Ohio State to fight back. That's going to be it for today's edition of Raw Takes with Andrew Hoty. Please make sure to like and subscribe. And remember to check me out on social media. Facebook, Raw Takes with Andrew Hoty. Twitter/X, Hoty Andrew. And Instagram, Hoty Raw Takes. I'm Andrew Hoty. Those are my Raw Takes. We'll be back next week reflecting on Week 2 and going over what's in store for Week 3, plus more on baseball and college football. And we'll start to inch closer to the NBA season and talk a little basketball later on. Thank you for tuning in to today's edition of Raw Takes with Andrew Hoty. Have a great day, everybody.